How's it going, everyone? Today, I'll be going over a personal favorite of mine, Kadena, Slinking Sorcerer. Deception is a key strategy here, and with over 25 morphs, your opponents will be left guessing as we slink our way into victory. Kadena, Slinking Sorcerer is a 3/3 for 1 black-green-blue who reads, the first face-down creature spell you cast each turn costs 3 less to cast. Whenever a face-down creature enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Besides being in the best colors in Commander, Kadena happens to be an amazing engine that ties the entire deck together. Not only that, but the once per turn clause allows us to take advantage of the card draw, even on our opponent's turns. However, because she's so pivotal to the deck's game plan, being removed early can really hurt the necessary acceleration to get out ahead of our opponents. The core game plan is simple. Play powerful morphs that allow us to interact favorably with our opponents, establish an engine that keeps us going, and eventually win the game through an all-out attack. We are heavily prioritizing 2 CMC ramp spells, as landing Kadena by the 3rd turn of the game is critical. Carrying this momentum into the late game, as well as outvaluing our opponents, will allow us to cast one of our game-ending spells. As mentioned previously, 2 CMC ramp spells are the primary ramp spells desired, and with this suite of spells, including mana rocks, allows us to quickly find which colors are still required to cast Kadena. Also included in the list is a small package dedicated to reducing the cost of morphs. The draw trigger on Kadena is not once per turn, so the more we cast, the more we draw. Some of the primary draw engines outside of the Commander include Secret Plans, Beast Whisperer, and a Pheto Runecaster. I would also like to make special mention of Guardian Project. Guardian Project states, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control, or a creature in your graveyard, draw a card. Morphs are not token creatures, and they also lack a name. This allows us to draw through the card's effect. All of this rampant card draw is nice, but if we can't flip our morphs, what's the point? Well, aside from the fact we are running low CMC interaction to keep the general cost down, we also include Wilderness Reclamation and Seedborn Muse. This allows us to untap lands, or all permanents in the case of Seedborn Muse, and let our opponents fall prey to our mischievous morphs. Finally, spells that give us flash allow us to take full advantage of Kadena, as her ability says, each turn, not each of your turns. Having one of these out early, as well as resolving Kadena, will allow you to establish a board in 1 turn of the table, all the while keeping your hand topped off with interaction to aid us in the midgame. Let's start with how we deal with onboard threats. Echo Tracer and Ice Feather Aven allow us to bounce problematic creatures, while Thousand Winds allows us to punish big attacks, though it comes at a steep cost. For a more permanent answer, cards like Silumgar Assassin will let us destroy the creature outright. We also run a small selection of mind control effects when we'd rather have those creatures for ourselves. Interacting with our opponent's spells on the stack is important as well, as many cards have already done their damage by the time the spell resolves. Creatures like Voidmage Apprentice and Voidmage Prodigy will allow us to counter spells full stop, and Kadena Silencer will allow us to interact with abilities already on the stack. But morphs can be even more manipulative. Willbender allows us to change the target of a spell with a single target. Mischievous Quanar lets us get a copy of an instant or sorcery for ourselves, and Karu's Spell Snatcher pulls double duty by countering their spell before allowing us to cast that card for free at any point later in the game. We are also playing a handful of cards that allow us to play around with our morphs. Master of the Veil lets us flip any morph back down, and Weaver of Lies lets us do the same for any number of other morphs. Ixidor, Reality Sculptor, not only buffs other creatures, but can flip them up for an often reduced cost. Lastly, ubiquitous cheap interaction that allows us to protect our game plan, like counter spells and indestructible effects, are easy to keep up, even when morphing is our top priority. We will also be running catch-all removal so we don't lose to any particular hate pieces. This section is very flexible, and you should find which cards fit your meta and budget. I mentioned Finale of Devastation early on as a key to victory, and it's my personal favorite way to finish a game. My two primary targets are Craterhoof Behemoth and Archetype of Imagination. Both of these creatures allow us to go over the top of our opponents, be it trample or flying, while also giving our creatures a huge boost if we can manage to make X 10 or greater when casting Finale. Another common way to finish out the game is X spells. Since our game plan is generally trying to keep the game going long while drowning our opponents in card advantage, these spells will eventually be cast for large amounts of mana. They don't necessarily synergize with the deck's themes, but Sultai is all about value, and these cards are certainly valuable. Some of the more observant viewers may have noticed a very powerful interaction I have yet to mention, and that is the Pickle Lock. The Pickle Lock involves Vesuvan Shapeshifter and Brine Elemental. Shapeshifter becomes a copy of another creature on the battlefield when it enters or when it's flipped face up, but the copy gains the ability to go face down during your upkeep. Brine Elemental reads, when Brine Elemental is turned face up, each opponent skips his or her next untap step. You may already see the interaction, but if not, I'll explain. When flipping Vesuvan Shapeshifter face up with its Morph ability, any ability that triggers with being flipped face up will trigger. So if you become a copy of Brine Elemental, your opponents will skip their next untap step. On your upkeep, use Shapeshifter's ability to flip itself face down and pay 1 and a blue to do it all over again. This doesn't completely lock your opponents out of the game, but it will certainly allow you to pull so far ahead they are unlikely to mount a comeback. When it comes to Commander, everything isn't always magical Christmas land, and there are certainly some weaknesses to the strategy I'd like to cover. First, metas with a lot of board wipes will give us problems. There's enough value early on to recover from one wipe, and we have enough interaction to protect our creatures from another. However, there's only so much to go around. Some metas are constantly wiping the board to protect planeswalkers or life totals, and this is generally too much for our list. Torpor Orb effects are a pain in the neck, as our commander draws off of morphs entering the battlefield and not when they are cast. We still have ways to accumulate value outside of our commander, but shutting off the centerpiece of the deck early on can slow us down considerably. And finally, a very special shout out to Elesh Norn, who can single-handedly hose our main strategy until we find a removal spell. Your opponents will be laughing, but you will be crying. Kadena is easily one of my favorite commanders. The deck is very fun, allows for tons of interaction and deception, as well as boasting a game plan with plenty of variety. Keeping your opponents guessing as you accrue value and play more and more morphs is a total blast that never gets old. At the time of recording, this deck was hovering around $900, $933 according to Card Kingdom. Almost half of this is because of the mana base, which includes a suite of fetches and powerful multicolor lands. I will be leaving a link to the deck in the description, as well as a budget list I quickly put together, which drops the more expensive pieces for cards which perform similarly at a much cheaper price. When it comes to power level, I would say this is most likely a 6 out of 10. It has a game plan and can execute it quickly. However, it's still mostly relying on creature combat to close out the game, which isn't going to cut it versus decks with smaller win packages and combos. And that's going to wrap it up for my first deck tech. I'd really like to continue making these, as I believe a more concise deck tech that covers the game plan instead of each individual card can help players get into pods and playing games. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more content similar to this, as I plan on making much more Commander content. Thank you.